visible at her sister's wedding, not because of hello viewers. Welcome back to my channel. For £1,000 sister latest news update, please subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon. A dramatic haircut, a sudden glow up, or even a scandalous secret revealed under the string lights. No, the shockwave that rippled through the reception hall came from the outfit, the dress, the entire ensemble. It was as if someone had raided a vintage thrift store in downtown Memphis, collided it with a 1980s aerobics commercial, and then tossed in a handful of glitter just to make sure no one could look away. The guests, dressed in their carefully curated wedding-appropriate attire, elegant floor-length gowns in muted jewel tones, tailored tuxedos, silk scarves artfully draped, paused mid-sip of champagne, fore covering above their lobster bisque, eyes darting toward the back of the ballroom where Amy Slaton stood, arms crossed, smiling with the serene confidence of someone who had just won a bet no one knew they'd made. She wore a dress. It was, for lack of a better term, a neon magenta and electric lime green jumpsuit. Not a sleek, modern, high-fashion jumpsuit. No. This was a 1978 disco fever dream, wide leg, flared at the ankles like a bell-bottomed parachute, with a plunging V neckline that seemed to defy gravity and good taste in equal measure. The fabric shimmered under the chandeliers with the kind of metallic sheen that suggested it had been salvaged from a forgotten stage costume worn by a 1980s pop band's backup dancer. Silver piping traced the seams, and a thick gold belt cinched her waist, though whether it was meant to accentuate or merely contain the chaos was debatable. On her feet, platform clogs, not sandals, not heels, not even trendy loafers. Clogs, wooden soles, painted a glossy white with tiny pink roses stenciled on the toe. They clacked loudly as she walked, each step echoing like a metronome set to unapologetic. Her hair, once a soft chestnut bob that framed her face with understated elegance, now cascaded in a wild, voluminous afro, dyed a gradient of hot pink at the roots, fading into lavender at the tips. A single, oversized rhinestone barrette shaped like a crescent moon held a section of it back, as if to say, "I know I look insane, but I'm still classy." And then there were the earrings, not just any earrings. Two dangling, oversized plastic fruit, one a banana, one a pineapple. Both were encrusted with rhinestones. They swung with every turn of her head, catching the light, glinting like tiny disco balls that had escaped a cruise ship's karaoke night. Aunt Carol, who had flown in from Ohio and still wore her 1992 wedding veil as a headband out of sheer nostalgia, dropped her napkin. "Is that Amy?" she whispered to her husband, who was mid-bite into a canapé. He swallowed hard, eyes wide. "I think she's trying to start a new trend." "Or get arrested." The bride, Amy's younger sister, Emily Slaton, stood at the head of the room, radiant in ivory lace, a cathedral train pooling behind her, tears glistening on her cheeks as she exchanged vows with her fiancé, Marcus, a quiet architect who wore a navy tuxedo and looked like he'd been gently bullied into this moment of bliss. She'd spent months planning every detail, the peonies, the handwritten vows, the playlist curated to include only songs from the 1990s that made her parents cry. She'd chosen the venue, a restored 1920s barn with fairy lights and burlap accents, because it felt timeless, elegant, romantic. And then Amy walked in. Emily turned, beaming as always, and waved. "Amy! You made it!" Her voice carried across the room, warm and genuine. Amy grinned, waved back with both hands, and gave a little hip sway as she approached, the clogs clacking like a marching band in slow motion. The room went quiet. Not the polite, hushed quiet of a wedding ceremony. not even the awkward silence that follows a poorly timed joke. This was the kind of silence that happens when reality itself seems to glitch. A man in the third row, who had just taken a sip of sparkling cider, spat it out. His wife elbowed him. "You're going to need a new shirt." At the head table, Emily's mother, Margaret Slaton, clutched her pearls, real pearls, heirloom pearls, passed down from her own mother, and stared. Her lips moved silently, forming the words, "What is that dot?" Her father, Robert, leaned over and muttered, "I think she's auditioning for a music video. She's our daughter," Margaret whispered back, voice trembling. "Our daughter who used to wear cardigans to high school graduation, Dot." "She still does," Robert replied. Until today, Amy reached the table, kissed Emily on both cheeks, and gave Marcus a firm handshake. "Congrats, man! You're lucky she didn't marry a guy who wears socks with sandals." Marcus blinked. "I wear socks with sandals." Amy grinned. "Only on Tuesdays. I saw your Instagram." A ripple of nervous laughter broke out. Someone coughed. A child pointed. "Mommy, why does the lady look like a rainbow threw up?" Amy didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't even glance down at herself. She simply pulled out a chair carefully, as if it might explode, and sat. The jumpsuit stretched across her thighs, the fabric straining slightly at the seams. She adjusted the banana earring, took a sip of water from her glass, smiled. The wedding photographer, a young man named Javier who had been hired for his editorial aesthetic and ability to capture emotion, had been snapping away throughout the ceremony. But when Amy walked in, he stopped. Just stopped. He lowered his camera, stared, then slowly raised it again, and began shooting like a man possessed. He didn't even look through the viewfinder anymore. He just clicked. Click. 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 By the time the first dance began, Javier had taken over 147 photos of Amy Slaton. He would later say, in an interview with Vogue Weddings, "I've photographed weddings in Bali, Paris, Tuscany. I've captured brides in tears, grooms in shock, grandparents dancing like teenagers. But nothing compared to the energy Amy Slaton brought to that room. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was a full-body declaration of autonomy." The dance floor cleared as Emily and Marcus took their first dance to Can't Help Falling in Love. The room held its breath. Everyone waited for the inevitable. The moment Amy would be pulled aside, politely asked to change, or at least told that her outfit was a little much. It never came. Instead, Amy stood up. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait for an invitation. She just walked to the center of the floor, placed her hands on her hips, and began to dance. Not gracefully, not elegantly, not even conventionally. She danced like no one was watching. Like the entire world had paused just for her. She swayed her hips, spun, threw her arms up, stomped her clogs, and then did a little two-step shuffle that looked like it was invented in a gym class in 1983. She was utterly, completely, joyfully unhinged. And then someone clapped. It was Emily's grandmother, 87-year-old Beatrice, who had been silent since the ceremony began. She raised a trembling hand and gave a single, slow clap, then another. Then, as if overcome by some long-buried memory, she began to sing along softly to the music, her voice thin but clear. "Take my hand. Take my whole life, too." One by one, others joined in. Aunt Linda, who had spent the entire reception whispering about how inappropriate it was, found herself tapping her foot. Then her husband joined her. Then the teenage cousins, who had been scrolling on their phones, put them down and started bouncing. The DJ, sensing a shift, switched the song to I Will Survive. Amy didn't miss a beat. She danced like she was 22 again. Like she was at a 1985 high school reunion. Like she was the only person in the room who remembered how to feel alive. By the end of the song, the entire dance floor was moving. Even Marcus had abandoned Emily's side and was now attempting a version of Amy's shuffle, arms flailing, face beet red but grinning ear to ear. Emily, still in her gown, laughed until she cried. She ran to Amy and pulled her into a hug, burying her face in the ridiculous, glittery neon fabric. "You're insane," she whispered. Amy hugged back. "I know. But you're marrying a man who thinks Casual Friday means khakis. I had to remind everyone that weddings aren't just about tradition, they're about joy." The next morning, the photos went viral. Not just on Instagram, not just on TikTok, on the Today Show, on Good Morning America, on CNN's Weird But True segment. The image that dominated: Amy, mid-dance, one hand on her hip, the other raised triumphantly, banana earring catching the light, clogs planted firmly on the wooden floor, her afro a halo of pink and lavender, the entire room behind her dancing, laughing, crying, living. The caption on the most shared post: Amy Slaton showed up to her sister's wedding in a disco jumpsuit and changed everything. By noon, Amy Slaton wedding had trended globally. News outlets scrambled for interviews. Was this a protest? A performance art piece? A middle finger to wedding norms? Asked the New York Times, "Is this the new bridal party uniform?" Wondered Elle. "Why did she do it?" Asked People magazine. "Why not?" replied Amy in her first interview, filmed on her porch in a pair of denim overalls and a plain white t-shirt. Her hair now back to its natural chestnut, no rhinestones in sight. "I didn't do it to be shocking," she said, sipping iced tea, barefoot on the wooden steps. "I did it because I remembered something my grandma told me when I was 7. She said, 'Amy, life's too short to wear clothes that make you feel small.' I spent years trying to be the quiet one, the responsible one, the girl who wore the right dress to the right event. But today, I wore the dress that made me feel like me. She paused, smiled. "And honestly, I think my sister needed to see that. She's so busy being perfect, she forgets to be happy. Maybe if she sees her big sister dancing in a banana earring, she'll remember that weddings aren't about perfection. They're about love. And sometimes, love looks like a neon jumpsuit. The internet exploded. Memorial Day sales spiked for retro jumpsuits. Banana earrings sold out on Etsy within hours. A fashion historian at the Met wrote a 12-page paper titled "The Cultural Reclamation of the 1980s, Jumpsuit in Contemporary Weddings," a case study in Amy Slaton. A TikTok trend emerged. #MyWedding outfit was a statement, where people posted their own unconventional wedding looks: men in clown shoes, brides in motorcycle jackets, groomsmen in pajamas. Emily's wedding, once planned as a quiet, timeless affair, became known as the jumpsuit wedding. It was featured in Martha Stewart weddings under the headline, "How One Outfit Redefined Modern Weddings." The dress? It was auctioned off for charity, the proceeds going to a mental health nonprofit for young women. The winning bidder? A 16-year-old girl from Nebraska who had been bullied for wearing colorful clothes to school. She wrote Amy a letter. "I wore your dress to my school dance." No one laughed. They clapped. "I felt like I could breathe for the first time. Amy never wore the jumpsuit again. But she kept the banana earrings. She wore them to her next sister's wedding, Emily's younger sister, Lila, who got married 2 years later. This time, she wore a simple black dress. But on her ears, the bananas, glinting, unapologetic. And when Lila asked, "Why those again?" Amy just smiled, Dot. "Because some things," she said, "are worth remembering, Dot." The world moved on. The photos faded from trending. The memes were archived. The dress was donated to a museum of pop culture, Dot, but in the Slaton family photo album, there's a single page tucked between pictures of Emily in her veil and Marcus holding her hand that doesn't show the bride or the groom, Dot. It shows Amy, Dot, mid-dash, dance, Dot, hair wild, Dot, earrings swinging, Dot, clogs clacking. And the entire room, every single person, dancing with her, Dot. No one in the photo is looking at the bride. They're all looking at Amy. And they're all smiling, Dot. The wedding planners still get asked about it. "Do you have a Amy Slaton package?" clients will say. "You know, the one where someone breaks the mold." The answer is always the same. We don't offer packages, but we do offer space. Space for the woman who shows up in a jumpsuit, Dot, space for the one who dances like no one's watching, Dot, space for the one who remembers that sometimes the most powerful thing you can wear isn't fabric, it's truth. And sometimes truth looks like a banana earring, Dot. And sometimes that's exactly what love needs, Dot. Years later, when Amy was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's, her family gathered for one last celebration, not a wedding, but a life party. She was in a wheelchair, her hair thin and gray, her eyes still bright, Dot. She didn't recognize most of the faces. But when someone put on "I Will Survive," she smiled, Dot, and then slowly,